The Maidens by Michaelides. Chapter 2. The Monday evening group met in Mariana's front room. It was a good-sized room. It had been given over to the use of therapy soon after Mariana and Sebastian moved into the yellow house. They were very fond of that house. It was at the foot of Primrose Hill in northwest London and painted the same bright yellow as the primroses that grew on the hill in the summer. Honeysuckle climbed up one of the outside walls, covering it with white, sweet-smelling flowers, and in the summer months, their scent crept into the house through the open windows, climbing up the stairs and lingering in the passages and rooms, filling them with sweetness. It was unseasonably warm that Monday evening. Even though it was early October, the Indian summer prevailed, like an obstinate party guest, refusing to heed the hints from the dying leaves on the trees that it might be time to go. The late afternoon sun flooded into the front room, drenching it with a golden light tinged with red. Before the session, Mariana drew the blinds, but left the sash windows open a few inches to let in some air. Next, she readjusted the chairs into a circle. 9 chairs, a chair for each member of the group, and one for Mariana. In theory, the chairs were meant to be identical, but life didn't work like that. Despite her best intentions, she had accumulated an assortment of upright chairs over the years in different materials and various shapes and sizes. Her relaxed attitude to the chairs was perhaps typical of how she conducted her groups. Mariana was informal, even unconventional in her approach. Therapy, particularly group therapy, was an ironic choice of profession for Mariana. She had always been ambivalent about groups, even suspicious of them, ever since she was a child. She had grown up in Greece, on the outskirts of Athens. They had lived in a large, ramshackle old house on top of a hill that was covered with a black and green shroud of olive trees. As a young girl, Mariana would sit on the rusty swing in the garden and ponder the ancient city beneath her, sprawling all the way to the columns of the Parthenon on top of another hill in the distance. It seemed so vast, endless. She felt so small and insignificant, and she viewed it with a superstitious foreboding. Accompanying the housekeeper on shopping trips to the crowded and frenetic market in the center of Athens always made Mariana nervous, and she was relieved and a little surprised to return home unscathed. Large groups continued to intimidate her as she grew older. At school, she found herself on the sidelines, feeling as if she didn't fit in with her classmates. And this feeling of not fitting in was hard to shake. Years later, in therapy, she came to understand that the playground was simply a macrocosm of the family unit, meaning her uneasiness was less about the here and now, less about the playground itself, or the market in Athens, or any other group in which she might find herself, and more to do with the family in which she grew up, and the lonely house she grew up in. Their house was always cold, even in sunny Greece, and there was an emptiness to it, a lack of warmth, physical and emotional. This was due in large part to Mariana's father, who, although a remarkable man in many ways, good-looking, powerful, razor-sharp, was also highly complicated. Mariana suspected he had been damaged beyond repair by his childhood. She never met her father's parents, and he rarely mentioned them. His father was a sailor, and the less said about his mother, the better. She worked at the docks, he said, with such a look of shame. Mariana thought she must have been a prostitute. Her father grew up in the slums of Athens and around the port of Piraeus. He started working on the ships as a boy, quickly becoming involved with trade and the import of coffee and wheat, and Mariana imagined less savory items. By the time he was 25, he had bought his own boat and built his shipping business from there. Through a combination of ruthlessness, blood, and sweat, he created a small empire for himself. He was a bit like a king, Mariana thought, or a dictator. She was later to discover he was an extremely wealthy man, not that you would have guessed it from the austere, Spartan way they lived. Perhaps her mother, her gentle, delicate English mother, might have softened him had she lived. But she died tragically young, soon after Mariana was born. Mariana grew up with a keen awareness of this loss. As a therapist, she knew a baby's first sense of self comes through its parents' gaze. We are born being watched. Our parents' expressions, what we see reflected in the mirror of their eyes, determines how we see ourselves. Mariana had lost her mother's gaze and her father. Well, he found it hard to look at her directly. He would usually glance just over her shoulder when addressing her. Mariana would continually adjust and readjust her position, shuffling, edging her way into his sideline, hoping to be seen, but somehow always remaining peripheral. On the rare occasions, she did catch a glimpse into his eyes. There was such disdain there, such burning disappointment. His eyes told her the truth. She wasn't good enough. No matter how hard she tried, Mariana always sensed she fell short, managing to do or say the wrong thing, just by existing. She seemed to irritate him. He disagreed with her endlessly, no matter what, performing Patricia to her Kate. If she said it was cold, he said it was hot. If she said it was sunny, he insisted it was raining. But despite his criticism and contrariness, Mariana loved him. He was all she had, and she longed to be worthy of his love. There was precious little love in her childhood. She had an elder sister, but they weren't close. Eliza was 7 years her senior, with no interest in her shy younger sibling, and so Mariana would spend the long summer months alone, playing by herself in the garden under the stern eye of the housekeeper. No wonder, then, she grew up a little isolated and uneasy around other people. The irony that Mariana ended up becoming a group therapist was not lost on her, but paradoxically, this ambivalence about others served her well. In group therapy, the group, not the individual, is the focus of treatment. To be a successful group therapist is to some extent to be invisible. Mariana was good at this. In her sessions, she always kept out of the group's way as much as possible. She only intervened when communication broke down, or when it might be helpful to make an interpretation, or when something went wrong. On this particular Monday, a bone of contention arose almost immediately, requiring a rare intervention. The problem, as usual, was Henry.